So our metros are in a mess. Fuel is set to go up again at midnight tomorrow. There are concerns of food inflation may spike again due to the devastation of the bird flu outbreak. Retrenchments are on the horizon at one of the country's biggest miners, and of course load shedding is still with us. So perhaps it's not surprising that Cosatu, the Congress of South African Trade Unions, is planning a socio-economic march on Friday. But of course, it's probably the last thing that any company can afford is to have their staff going out on a one-day strike. But let's discuss this now with Jonathan Goldberg, Chairman of Global Business Solutions. Thank you so much for joining us. You know, I don't think anyone is going to argue with Cosatu that they've got a point. I think a lot of people are just so fed up with so much that's going wrong. But really, honestly, what company can afford to have workers stay away for another day with all the challenges of load shedding and lost hours, etc.?
Good evening, Sally, to you and your viewers. I think one's got to see where this will actually play out ultimately. If you look at the last Cosatu stay away on the 6th of July, also around economic issues, this one's more specifically around retrenchments and the bar on retrenchments specifically where companies are making profits. Effectively, we're going to see how supported this is. So I'll give you some direction just now in respect to what employers should do. But I think these protest actions, if they run regularly like they seem to be done now as a sort of last resort, I don't think they become effective. I think a lot of people say, well, we need the money because it's a no work, no pay situation, and people then come to work. Critical would be the transport systems would be in place to allow people to come to work.
It was quite interesting what happened in Cape Town today. The EFF was calling for a march in solidarity with the taxi industry. And I think it was Santaka who came out and said, actually, we've sort of resolved things. We've dealt with the issues we had with the city of Cape Town. And my understanding, the reports I'm getting, is that that strike was a bit of a damp squib. EFF didn't actually get the support. Do you think that that's going to become a bit of a trend?
I think one's got to go back, protest actions allowed in terms of, for the social partners, Cosatu, the trade union federations can raise issue at NEDLAC. These issues around retrenchments were raised as far back as 2017. August is the referral of this particular matter. So I think for business, the real issue is why so much later can you actually go on protest action? I think that's one issue. We've got to debate South Africa to say there should be a time limit. You refer a matter, and maybe within 6 months or 12 months of the referral, then you've got to have your protest action if you want it. But I think, the issue is deeper. I think when the taxi associations also lose revenue if workers don't go to work, I think we see that playing out, and I think it's a good thing. That's what a democracy is meant to do. In a fair, free democracy without violence and intimidation, people should have the election to go to work or not to go to work to support this action. Very important, Sally, in protest action properly done through NEDLAC, like this is proper protest action that's legal. Anyone can support this protest action, not only Cosatu members or one of the Cosatu affiliates. Anyone has the right not to go to work, and therefore you wouldn't be paid for that particular day. I think that is critically important to understanding these kind of actions.
Okay, so it's what Cosatu is planning on Friday. It's legal. They've done it absolutely the right way. And they're making some important points about the state of our economy and their concern about retrenchments, etc. But if we look at the perspective of a company, especially the smaller the company, I think often the more vulnerable it is to productivity losses. Is there any way they can protect themselves from potential productivity losses?
Position. Thank you, Sally. I think, first of all, they must communicate with their workers who's going to support it, who's not, and freely, that people can freely support it. I think that should be the employer's position. See who wants to attend work and who doesn't, and then engage the transport networks around your particular premises and from the places of work of your staff. I think that is critical. Look at cross-skilling, who could work if people don't come to work. Look at temporary replacement of workers for that particular day, and try to keep these businesses running. As you said, all businesses have been hit because of load shedding, because of service delivery problems, similar to your last clip, and effectively this is the last thing they need. So my wish would be businesses must continue to operate. If some workers elect not to come to work in support of this protest action, that's their right. They shouldn't be paid for the day, and we should continue to run those particular businesses in all the measures, looking at temporary staff, looking at cross-skilling, looking at people doing duplicate jobs for the day. I think that's critically important for keeping this economy going in South Africa through these tough times.
Right, so it's about having a plan, communicating with your staff, and working out how to keep the operation going. Do you think there's enough openness within companies for people to feel free to say, actually, I'm really upset about what's going on with our economy and I want to do this march? Do you think that companies and people who run companies are open enough to accept that it is that individual's constitutional right?
I think maybe there needs to be some work done in that regard, and that's why I talk about communication with your staff now, tomorrow. Communicate with your staff, not in a threatening way, engage them in respect of what their fears and concerns are. For all workers, no matter what level you are, I think your biggest fear is losing your job. And again, if employers are doing well, they've got the basics in place, they're surviving, then they should talk to their workers about that and find plans around making sure that those operations continue in these kind of protest actions. They're not intended to shut down all operations. They are intended for democratic rights of people to support or not to support action. And we don't want a continuation of violence and intimidation in respect of any type of action in South Africa. That should be firmly stamped out by all organizations. And many people are doing a lot to try and ensure that we have a civil society where effectively you have a right to protest, a right to strike if it's followed correctly, and you have a right to come to work. Very important, because obviously
your picture seems to have frozen, but
transport in those issues.
Your point is very well made. Thank you so much. That the right to protest, it is enshrined in our constitution. It is the right of all of us. It's going to be really interesting to see how much support Cosatu's call for the socio-economic protest on Friday gains. Jonathan Gold.